All right, we are in John chapter 2.
Oh, we are just turning and burning.
We are zooming through the book of John all the way up to chapter 2. All right, let's see. You'll remember several times I think I've told you that John has put the purpose of his book back in chapter 20, verse 31, which essentially says that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. That's what he's all about, that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And so what we have seen in chapter 1 is a series of testimonies by a variety of folks for John to be able to share those testimonies with us to help us to believe that Jesus is the Son of Christ. So we had the testimony of John himself, right? I mean, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. All of that is John's testimony. And then we have John the Baptist testimony, right? Behold, the Lamb of God, all of that about his baptism and everything coming forward. And then we have the testimony of the disciples, right? You got, he is the Messiah. He is the King of Kings. He is the Son of God. He is the Son of Man. All of that, all of those words, all of that testimony comes from the disciples. So you finished up now with chapter 1, which really is a series of testimonies about who Jesus is. When we get to chapter 2, we begin a new section. We begin a section really of his public ministry from chapter 2 through chapter 12 is all about his public ministry, which is primarily about his miracles and some of the things that he said that go along with those miracles, that explain those miracles. But it's primarily about his miracles. Then we get to, just to complete the picture, when we get to chapter 13 through chapter 17, we then have this private ministry or private dialogue that he has with the disciples. And then finally, the last couple of chapters, 18 through 21, we see the death, the resurrection, and the post-resurrection information that John shares with us. So this is where we are. We're beginning this new section in chapter 2. I will say that, he has these miracles that he's sharing with us. If you don't need to turn, but back in chapter 20, chapter 20, verse 30, I read 31 to you a minute ago, but verse 30 says, and truly did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. And then in 21:25, he says, and there are also many other things that Jesus did, which if it were written one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. So we have, we're beginning this section. As I said, it's a long section, 10 chapters on his miracles, but this is just a very small sampling of the miracles that he did. He did miracles every day, every hour, as he interacted with the people, as he interacted with his disciples. John is just pulling out some here to help us, again, that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. Now, we pick up in chapter 2, we have the miracle at the wedding where he turns water into wine. And, let me just say up front, this one miracle, right, is enough to show that Jesus is the creator God. And, we've got, as I said, I think there's 6 miracles in here, and there's hundreds that he actually did. But, one is enough. But he shares with us 6 big miracles to show that this, again, that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ. That's what he's saying. All right, so let's get into it. Chapter 2, verse 1. Mine says, on the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. So it's the 3rd day, and if you've been following our days back, let me just give it to you again. Back to verse 19 of chapter 1, that was the first day. Verse 29 was the 2nd day. And verse 35 was the next day was the 3rd day. And now he says in chapter 2, verse 1, on the 3rd day. Well, he's not actually talking about the same 3 days that we've just been talking about. He's talking about the 3rd day, really since the following day, which is down in verse 43, right? Because that's now the 4th day, in verse 43. And so now this 3rd day is, what he's really saying is now 3 days after that. right? It doesn't come out in the English very well, but he's really saying 3 days after that, 3 days after he's met with Philip, and then they're on their way to Galilee. It takes them a couple of days to get to Galilee. As I said, it's 20 miles by foot. They probably spent the night on the way, but here we are at the third day, and he's in Cana of Galilee. Now, let me tell you something about Cana. Cana, as I said last time, I think, was a small fishing village, and the estimates were at that time there may have been 50 people that lived there. Very small, very small. Okay. As I said, it's a few miles from Nazareth, because as we saw, Nathanael looked down on Nazareth. But Nazareth was a huge town, maybe 500 people. Okay, so this gives you some idea of the, what we're talking about here, small town, and next to a little bit larger town, if you will, with Nazareth. And it says here that, right, the mother of Jesus was there. And Jesus, of course, was from Nazareth. He was raised in Nazareth. His mother would be from Nazareth. So she has come to this wedding in Cana from Nazareth. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later, but it would not be surprising. This town only has 50 people. They have a wedding. This is going to be the big event. This is going to be a huge event for a very small town. Probably the whole town is invited. And then their neighbors, there's some of their neighbors who probably are relatives, certainly are friends that would be invited to this wedding. So just to also remind you, I think, we've probably talked about this before, but in these days, when there was a wedding, there was typically an engagement that happened a year earlier. These folks have gotten engaged. The groom has been preparing for this day by getting a house ready, either building a new house or adding on to his parents' house. The groom's family is paying for the whole wedding. He's making sure everything in the wedding goes right. It's all up to the groom. It's kind of his proof that he's ready for marriage, if you will. So Jesus, let's remember Jesus now. Jesus has lived in Nazareth. He knows these people, right? He's been with them for 30 years. And what has happened recently? Recently, he has been baptized by John, right? Then he goes into the wilderness for 40 days, and he's tempted by Satan. He's picked up his 5 disciples, and now he is coming back to his hometown, if you will, Nazareth and Cana. And his first miracle then is this miracle with his family and friends. So what we're seeing here is the transition of Jesus from his private life, if you will, in Nazareth to his public ministry. Now, his first miracle, as we said, is going to be at this wedding. And many of the commentaries make a point that this is Jesus is making a statement here about weddings, about marriage, giving them, emphasizing the sanctity of marriage, the importance of weddings, the importance of public covenants. He's honoring it. And, obviously, as we've seen, marriages are a very important part of a healthy society. When marriage is not honored, we end up in a mess like we're in right now. Do we need to get married? What is marriage? We don't have to do all that stuff, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing I'd say about Jesus being here at this, performing his first miracle here at this wedding, is just to kind of remind us that Jesus, I don't say this lightly, but Jesus is a regular guy. Unlike John the Baptist, right? John the Baptist was austere and was out in the wilderness and eating locusts and honey and living in, weird clothes. And here we have Jesus. He's invited to a wedding and he goes. He's invited to a party and he goes, right? He's interested in regular life stuff, right? Regular life, including weddings. And you got to contrast that against the religious people of the day, right? The Pharisees, right, who are all about their rules and regulations and what you could do and what you couldn't do, right? Jesus is about, hey, there's a party, let's go. There's an opportunity to get together with regular people and enjoy life. Let's do that. And it just reminds us that all of life is in Jesus's sphere, right? All of life, is where Jesus is a part of. Because I think sometimes we block out things and say, well, Jesus, that's somebody we talk about at church. That's somebody we talk about. We get together with our Christian friends. But Jesus is in all of life. All of the things that we do, Jesus is there and can be there. And it really comes down to us recognizing him as a part of all life, as a part of all the things that we participate in. Because anytime we recognize that Jesus is there, that becomes a sacred thing. That becomes a sacred event, whether that's our work or whether that's going to the grocery store, right? If we recognize Jesus, recognize he's present even there, that becomes a sacred, holy event because we recognize he's there. And I think we don't do that enough. We partition, we forget about him, we get into doing something else and we miss the opportunity to see him at work, to see his hand working in other people, the opportunity for us to share, the opportunity for us to help other folks who are in need because we're not paying attention that Jesus is there. His presence is there. So Jesus is at a wedding. All right, let's go on.
Hey,
Now,
Rich.
both Jesus, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, just one thought. If you actually look at the timeline that's being presented here, we have 4 days in John chapter 1. And then on the third day, where the marriage occurred, which would be the seventh day, which I think is interesting, because 7 is always a very important number. It's also interesting that there were 6 water pots. I know you're going to get to that, but I'm just wondering if there's anything about like the creation week going on here, where obviously he is doing a creative miracle, changing the water to wine. I just wonder if something like that might be in the background as we're looking at this miracle.
I really like that thought. I hadn't seen that thought anywhere. That's good. Yeah, this is probably the 7th day, and this is when his first miracle occurs. That's very interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard anything about the 6 water pots as to why the number 6 is important. We'll get to the water pots in a little bit, but it's intriguing to think about it that way. That's good. All right, verse 2. Now both Jesus and the disciples were invited to the wedding. Again, we know that all of these men were from this area, right? So they were all invited to the wedding, and they go to the wedding. So again, this should not be a surprising thing. So then we get down to verse 3. It says, and when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. Okay, so this begins the real story of, what we're trying to get to here. They ran out of wine. So this would be a real embarrassment, okay? As I said earlier, the bridegroom, he's supposed to be responsible for this event. He's been preparing for it for a year, and all of a sudden they run out of wine. So, part of the reason for this party is to prove that the couple is ready for marriage. And the bridegroom just messed up here. He didn't plan very well. Is he going to really be able to take care of this wife if he can't even plan a party? I mean, that kind of social embarrassment would be huge here. And so, it comes right to him. The other thing that's interesting to think about was that, Jesus, he comes, he brings his disciples. And then probably because he was there by this time, as I said, it's been, a month and a half or 2 months since Jesus has been baptized and then gone into the wilderness. It could very well be that word of him is spreading, and that if he shows up to the wedding, a bunch of other people show up to the wedding. And it could be because Jesus is there, they ran out of wine, because he and the people that came with him. It's just interesting to think about that. But anyway, they have come, they have run out of wine. And by the way, just to remind you, in those days, wine was kind of a staple drink. The water was not purified. Typically, it was not really safe to drink. So you had wine, which was fermented, which did some level of purification to the fruit juices. Typically, we think about the wine that we have today, it's more like very, very, very diluted wine, diluted maybe 1 to 3 or 1 to 7 or 8 or something. So not exactly the kind of wine that we would typically think about. But anyway, so then the mother of Jesus comes to Jesus and says, they have no wine. Now, why is the mother of Jesus coming and making this statement? That seems odd. It's not in her town. Why would she be coming and making this statement to Jesus?
He knows he can do something about it.
Yep.
I was gonna say she knows she's the chosen one.
Yeah, so we'll get to that in a second, but I mean, what might her role be in this wedding?
She might know the people. She might be like a matron of the ceremony or something like that.
Friend of the.
Yeah, right. So I'm just thinking in a very practical way, right? That she may very well be a matron in the area, someone that everybody knows, somebody who does this well and has been brought in to help, right? She could be kind of the mistress of ceremonies, if you will, who came in to help get everything organized and is well known in the community. So it's just interesting to think that that's who she does. And then, yes, she does come to Jesus and say they have no wine. You think she was expecting him to do a miracle?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you think she would expect him to do a miracle? He's never done a miracle.
Because she knows that he can.
How does she know that?
Because she knows that he's the son of God.
How does she know that?
The angel spoke to her. The angel spoke.
All good, all good. I'm just, we could get all the facts connected together. That's all right.
The Bible says so.
Doing good. Yeah, I mean, she had, the angel spoke to her when she was, when the baby was first born. We had the interaction, with Zechariah and all that. So she certainly understands, and as it says back then, she hid all these things in her heart. She certainly understands that this young man now is somebody special and is going to do something special. She doesn't know exactly what it was. I'm not sure she thinks he's going to change the water into wine. I think that would be maybe a stretch. But she certainly, the other thing to think about is Jesus has grown up in her house for 30 years, right? If they ever have a problem, she goes to Jesus and says, Jesus, can you help? And Jesus always helps, right? Whatever the problem is, the goat next door is sick. What do we do about it, Jesus? And Jesus would know what to do, right? We don't have any water today. What do we do about it? And Jesus would know what to do. So, I mean, part of it, I think, is, the other thing to mention is that Joseph is not mentioned in the scripture. And in fact, he's not mentioned anywhere past his birth. So it's very likely that Joseph has passed. And Jesus, being the eldest, is going to be the man of the house, if you will. So it's not, from just a very practical sense, it's not unreasonable that Mary would go to Joseph, that Mary has some kind of role in this wedding, and with the wine being out, that she would go to Jesus and say, hey, can you help us here? Now, she may have thought Jesus would, send some folks out to the store and get more wine, or made excuses to the people for why they didn't have wine or what. But I'm not sure she would have thought he was going to make this miracle happen. Anyway, but the other thing I'll say is, in a moment, we'll see Jesus's response to Mary, which was not very positive. And I do want to ask the question here is, do we come to God in this way, right? Hey, God, my wine has run out. What are you going to do about it? Hey, God, my wine has run out. Hey, God, I'm in trouble. Hey, God, I got a problem. Hey, God, I need you to do something about my situation. We'll come back to that thought in a little bit. All right, so let's go on to verse 4. Let's look at the response that Jesus has, because it's pretty surprising. Jesus said to her, woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. So first of all, he uses this phrase woman rather than mother, which is surprising, which is unusual, it catches our attention. Now, I will say, some people will say, well, what he's really saying here is, we would translate it today, ma'am. He's not being disrespectful. He's calling her ma'am rather than woman, rather than, oh, you old woman or something. He's not being disrespectful, but he's not calling her mother. It's not an intimate expression. It's a different expression. And then he adds this statement, what have I to do with you? What's interesting about this statement, what does your concern have to do with me, or what do the two of us have to do with this together, depending on your translation? Interesting about this is that this phrase is used other places in the New Testament, and in every case, it's used by demons. And it's used as a separation phrase. What are you messing with us for? Why are you messing in our stuff? Why don't you leave us alone, Jesus? That's when this phrase is used in other places in Scripture. So there's no question that it is a separating statement. It's a statement that he is separating himself from Mary. So again, remember where Jesus is. Jesus has he has left. He has been baptized. He's been in the wilderness for 40 days. He's come now, picked up his disciples. He's arrived here at Cana. And his mother says to him, hey, they have no wine. In other words, I need you to do something about it. And his response is, what do I have to do with you? Why are you asking me to do stuff for you? What makes you think you still have control over my actions? So this is, it's a little bit harsh to hear, but he is saying here, I don't do your business anymore. I'm now doing my Father's business, and I only do what my Father tells me to do. She's now dealing not with her son in an earthly sense, but with the Son of God in a very real sense. His obedience to his Father now is more important to his obedience to his mother. We see him make this statement kind of over and over again. If you look, there's a couple of places. If you look at John chapter 8, verse 28, John 8:28. Here it says, then Jesus said to them, when you lift up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing of myself, but as my Father taught me, I speak these things. Right? And then we have a couple of interesting other interactions that he has with his mother and brothers and sisters. One you'll remember in Matthew. I'm going to hold that a minute. I'm going to Luke. I always forget that Luke is left of John. Luke chapter 11, or one that you may have skipped over. Luke chapter 11, verse 27. Luke 11:27. Mine says, and it happened as he spoke these things that a certain woman from the crowd raised her voice and said to him, blessed is the womb that bore you, and the breast which nursed you. And he said, more than that, blessed are those who hear the word of God and keep it. Right? This person in the crowd is blessing his mother, and he's saying, well, listen, much more important than who my mother was is those who hear the word of God and keep it. And then we have that statement in Matthew chapter 12, which you'll remember, but we'll read it to you. Matthew chapter 12, verse 46. Excuse me. It says, while he was still talking to the multitudes, behold, his mother and brothers stood outside seeking to speak to him. You remember at this time his mother and brothers were concerned about his sanity. And then in verse 47, it says, then one of them said to him, look, your mother and brothers are standing outside seeking to speak to you. But he answered and said to one of them, who is my mother and who are my brothers? And he stretched out his hand toward his disciples and said, here are my mother, here are my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. So what we're seeing here then, going back now to John, what we're seeing here then is the separation of Jesus from his earthly family and the connection more directly to his heavenly family. The real positive thing to take from this statement is that our relationship with Jesus, our relationship with God, has nothing to do with our lineage. right? Has nothing to do with your parents, has nothing to do with where you came from, has nothing to do with your history, right? Our relationship with God is independent of that. Just because your parents were Christian doesn't mean you're going to be a Christian, right? Just because Jesus's mother is asking him this question is irrelevant. He's only responding now to what the Father says to him. And does add at the end, my hour has not yet come. Again, this statement is repeated over and over in John, which he's really saying, I'm now on a divine schedule. I'm now on a different schedule from this wedding, from these events that are on your social calendar. I'm on a completely different agenda and a completely different schedule towards my hour, which we'll talk about a lot more later on in the book of John. But it's not about what's going on here physically. I'm on a schedule and I'm doing things that the Father has told me to do that are pointing to my hour, which is his death. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
The next verse just really makes me want to laugh. It's like, no matter what he said, she knew he was going to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So verse 5 is great, isn't it? So verse 5, so let's go there. It says, his mother said to the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. Now, part of me says, this is the mother going, oh boy, whatever, whatever he says, just do it. I'm fed up with him. But I don't, you can't, that would be our humanness getting into it. I think that what you really see here is again, she knows who he is. She knew this all from the start. His statement did not hurt her. His statement, you see no argument from her, no pushback from her, right? All you see from her is very similar to John's statement, I must decrease, he must increase. I think that really is that the attitude that you see here from Mary, which is really amazing, right? That, hey, listen, whatever he says, you do it. He is the Son of God. He is this one that was prophesied to me, so many years ago. So yes, his statement is amazing. So what's interesting is, as we'll see, this miracle that he occurs is something the Father wanted, right? Is something that the Father wanted him to do. It just happens to coincide with what the mother also wanted. Yeah. Was there another statement there that I missed? Another question?
No, it's interesting. I've just had this thought. I mean, it never talks about. He's separating himself for his ministry, but never talks about, hey, back my mom's house on the way to so and so. I mean, I don't think there's anywhere that talks about he went back to visit her or to see her, to have a meal with her in his journeys.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
I think his mom was on journeys with him.
Of course, that at the end of his life, right, one of the final things that he does is takes care of his mother, right? He assigns her over to John to take care of her. And in fact, uses the same phrase that he uses here. It's the woman who is standing beside you that I need you to take care of her. He makes so he is taking care of his mother even in the end. Anything else before I move on?
So I'll add a question here. So how do you resolve the point that she's asking him to do something, and then he says, this is not my hour, and then he does it? So it becomes his hour, or it was his hour already. I mean, it's an interesting dilemma there.
I think it's, again, he's trying to make a point that he's not under her control anymore. He's not going to do what she tells her, what she tells him to do, because again, he's on a different time schedule towards his death. He's only going to do those things that the Father tells him to do. And in this particular case, what the Father tells him to do is aligned with what she wants. So I think this is the separation event for him from his family. He wanted to make sure that's a message he wanted to get, not only to his family, but to his disciples, obviously, who are hearing this.
I have a question about that. Because being a mother, if you're saying that, and you're saying that it was abrupt, wouldn't she be hurt by it?
So,
With your words, Rich.
I did say it. I did say that. It was abrupt. And I think that, and what I also said was, I think Mary, because of, she's already been talked to by the angels. She's already been talked to by Zechariah about this boy. She knew where he was going, and she knew that he had this this place in history ahead of him. And she recognized by these words that this was that time. This was the time when she had to give up. She had to become less in his life, and that was okay with her. I think otherwise we would have seen a pushback from her. We would have seen an angry response from her. And we don't see that. What we see is someone who says, I understand. I get it. Whatever he says, do that.
Hey, Rich.
Yeah.
In the actual Greek, it really says, what is to me and to you? That's the literal meaning. But what he's really saying is, why is this a concern to me or to you? What's the big deal? In a sense, that's kind of what he's saying there. And then he says, my hour is not yet come. And it's almost as if you look at every other time that expression is used, he's talking about his death. He's saying, time of my glorification, the time of me giving myself to the Father and to the world is not come yet. It's almost as if he's saying, this isn't really that important. I mean, I'm just trying to, kind of paraphrase it. Why is it such supreme importance to you when in the Father's will, this is nothing, right? I mean, that's one way to possibly think about that verse.
Yeah. No, I think that's all in there. I agree.
So Rich, one last thing, I know you want to move on. So the thought hit me that it's interesting, the dialogue there, because it's almost like she's telling God what to do, and God's saying, I'll move when I want to move. You're not going to tell me what to do and when to do it or how to do it. And I think that reveals a little bit of the character of God, that he's going to do what he wants to do when he wants to do it.
Yeah, and that's why I made the statement, don't we often come to God in the same way? God, I'm out of wine. I need you to do something about it. And he's going, I got a completely different timetable. I got something else I'm trying to do here. It's not about your wine. It's not about your little problem. It's not about your timetable. It's about my timetable. And it's about what I'm trying to accomplish. I think this is a big teaching he's trying to get across to them here.
I would just add that when you look at the way he performed this miracle, the way he answered her request, you said her request was aligned with the Father's will, but he provided the wine in a much different way than what she was asking for. The wine was far superior to what was expected, and the quantity was huge. When you look at the 6 stone jars, my notes say that they were approximately 20 to 30 gallons. So he provided a vast abundance of what she was asking for. So it was far more. His answer was far more than what her request was.
Yeah.
Good point.
All right, let's go. That's good. Let's go into the miracle now. So verse 7. I think we're verse 7. Verse 6. Excuse me. Now there were set there 6 water pots of stone. Notice they're of stone, according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. These are big vessels. Okay, they're 20 or 30 gallons of water in each one of these. So I want you to think about these vessels differently than the picture that's probably in your head. Or let me just say the picture that has been in my head. These beautiful pots, right, with that are filled up with water. I want you to think of these as bathtubs. Bathtubs. There's 20 or 30 gallons of water. You can take a bath in that. All right. These are purification tubs that are set there. They're in stone. You don't move these boogers around, right? They're stone with 20, 30 gallons of water in them. This is, and what are they used for? Purification. What was purification? Cleaning, right? They cleaned the dishes here. They cleaned their hands here. They cleaned their feet here. They took baths in these vessels. Okay. So, I think we think of them sometimes as you put this, you will see he puts water in these, and oh my gosh, he puts this pure water in, and then he turns it into wine. I think you need to think about these. This is some nasty water here. There's some nasty tubs of water that he's got here. That he decides he doesn't go to, there obviously are wine vessels that are being used for the wine. He doesn't go to those. He goes to these nasty, large tubs of water for this miracle. And then in verse 7, right, Jesus said, fill the water pots with water, and they filled them up to the brim. Right? He chose these vessels of purification. He chose these vessels of purification for this miracle, right? To change the water into wine. Now, you know that in the New Testament, wine is associated with Jesus' blood, right? The whole Lord's table is connected with that. And, we left not too long ago, 1 John, and in 1 John, chapter 1, verse 7, it makes the statement that Jesus' blood cleanses us from all unrighteousness, right? His blood cleanses us from all unrighteousness. So don't miss the picture here of these purification vessels that are filled with his blood, that are filled with wine as a picture. He's painting a picture here. He's not just performing this miracle of changing water to wine. He's painting an important picture here, a symbolic parable, if you will, of his death, that these purification vessels are becoming contained with his blood, which are then going to purify them. It's also saying this ritual of cleansing is about to be over. Right? My time has not yet come, but when it comes, this whole ritual of cleansing is going to be over. Not going to be doing that anymore, because through my blood, right, is how you get purified. The other just practical thing I'll show you here, right? He filled the vessels to the brim. One of the reasons for doing that is so that someone couldn't say, oh yeah, he got these water vessels and he added a little bit of wine to them, and that's how he made this new wine. No, he filled the vessels to the brim, so nothing else could be added. So it was all water, all dirty, nasty water that was in these vessels that got turned into wine.
The best
But
taste.
don't miss the picture of the purification here. That's a big deal. All right. Anything else on that before we move on?
I've always thought these were empty to begin with.
Yeah.
And he filled them,
Doesn't say that.
3 gallons.
Yeah. He just says they filled them up. Doesn't say they were empty. My guess is they had a bunch of dirty, nasty water in from all those guests who had come to the feast and cleaned in them before they went into the feast. It makes the miracle richer to me to think about that. All right, let's go on to verse 8. And he said to them, who's the them? The them is the servants that they're speaking to, right? Back in verse 5, mother's talking to the servants, right? And the servants fill the vessels up. And he says to them, fill the water pots with water. And then in verse 8, and he said to them, draw some out now and take it to the master of the feast. And they took it. Now, the master of the feast is probably some senior person, the MC, if you will, the person who's in charge of the wedding. He's telling them when they're supposed to do the chicken dance and things like that, right? He takes it to the master of the feast to show it to them. And then finally in verse 9, we actually see that this miracle has occurred. When the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, he did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew. And the master of the feast called the bridegroom. We'll get to that in a minute. So here you have, he tastes the water that's made into wine. When is the water made into wine?
When he prays over it.
When did he pray over it? Where was that? I missed that part.
That's just the thought would be that he,
Instantly.
prayed to God over it before he told him to draw it out.
Yeah, I must have missed that verse though.
Yeah.
It looks like when they drew it out, so when they actually went to get the water out, it was wine when they brought it to the man.
So the answer is we don't know when when it occurred, right? I mean, as you know, as was said, it could be when they drew it out, it changed into wine. So the water in the rest of the pot was still water, and just only what they drew out turned into wine. So maybe they didn't have 6 times 30 gallons of wine. They may have had 6 times 30 gallons of nasty water, and only what they drew out was made wine. Or it could be that the whole pots were filled with wine. We don't know. That's not clear from the text. Just wanted you to ponder it for a minute. The other thing is, as was pointed out, there is no praying over the vessels, or Jesus raising his hands to God and saying, "Oh God, please change this water into wine." There was no him spitting into the bucket, and because of his spittle, it turned into wine. There was no his sticking his hand into the bucket. There's no fanfare at all, right? It's just his will to change the water to wine. Go ahead.
No, I said it was words.
Yeah, it's just his will. He just decided that this water was going to turn to wine, and it turned to wine. Sometimes we get a little funny about, well, how do these miracles occur? Well, he spit on the dirt and put it on his eyes, and he did this, he did that. But here, it's just his will. He just decided. The other thing I want to mention here is, what is the miracle? The miracle is that this water turned into wine. Well, doesn't God change water to wine all the time? Right? Usually he does it with a seed and a vine and rain and sun and soil and grapes and crushing of grapes and filtering and fermenting. In this case, he just skipped a few steps. He went right from water to wine.
Just true.
Right? But I guess the thing I want to say is, it's a miracle that God creates grapes, that God creates vines, that God creates wine in the regular way, is miraculous. I mean, he could have decided, this animal over here, I'm going to give them an udder, and out of that udder is going to come wine, right? I mean, he does it with milk. Is that the craziest thing you've ever heard? Cows produce milk? I mean, goats, maybe he could have made them produce wine, right? I just want us to see the miracle in the everyday things that God does. I mean, it's a miracle. Now, this is a super miracle because he skipped the steps, right? And that's not the way we understand things as being normal, but God's a miraculous God. Now, the other thing I want to show you right here before we go further is, I want you to go back and look at the servants in this text, right? The servants. The mother comes to the servants in verse 5 and says, whatever he says to you, do it. And what are the servants thinking? Oh, brother, what have we gotten into now? There's some kind of argument here between the mother and the son, and whatever he tells you to do it, right? And then Jesus says, hey, I want you to fill the water pots with water. What's their reaction to that, right? Oh my, this is a waste of time. This is stupid. This is gross. And by the way, this has nothing to do with the problem, right? We got wine. We got to make wine in the world. Are we wasting time over here putting water in pots? And then finally, he says, take it to the master of ceremonies. Oh boy. What are the servants thinking now? No way. Not me. I'm not taking it to him. Are you kidding? He's asking them to step out in faith and do something that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And Jesus does this all the time. To the lame man, he says, stand. To the man with the withered arm, he says, stretch forth your hand. To the blind man, he says, open your eyes, right? And here he's saying to these guys, take this thing of water and bring it to the master of the ceremonies. All I want to point out is this is exactly how God interacts with us all the time, right? He gives us commands, do whatever he tells you. And our response is often, that does not make any sense. That doesn't make any sense at all. It's a waste of my time. It doesn't have anything to do with the real problem. I need you to deal with the problem we have. We're out of wine. You got to deal with that. And then he asks us to step out in faith. And our response is, no way, I can't do that. These servants saw a miracle only because they were obedient to the commands that they got. Because, as we see, the miracle is not understood by others. The master of the house didn't understand where the wine came from. The rest of the participants at the gala didn't understand it either. Just those who had been obedient and seen God's hand, they received the blessing. They knew something that nobody else knew because they had been obedient. They received this blessing of seeing God work. The Christian life is supposed to be a supernatural life where we see God work, but only if we obey his commands and look for him and pay attention to what he's doing. Okay.
Real quick.
Yeah.
The only other time that we read about drawing water out in John is the woman at the well in John 4, which is pretty interesting connection.
Yeah. We're gonna refer back to this passage when we get to John 4. Absolutely. Yeah, those two are connected. Good. So don't miss also at the end of verse 9, he calls to the bridegroom, right? The bridegroom, as I've said, he's responsible. So he would go to him and say, hey, what's going on with this wine? Right? Because he's responsible for it. But don't miss, if you just flip over a page to John chapter 3, verse 29, where John the Baptist talks about Jesus, and he says, he who has the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly because the bridegroom's voice, therefore this joy of mine is fulfilled. The true bridegroom, John is saying, is Christ, right? And here we have the master of the house going to the earthly bridegroom and talking to him about the wine, but really it was the true bridegroom who actually stepped in to take care of this situation, right? The one who never fails, the one whose wine never runs out. He has stepped in to actually bail out the earthly bridegroom who let the wine run out. All right, verse 10.
Cold walking in.
And he said to him, every man at the beginning sets out the good wine, and when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior, you have kept the good wine until now. So every man, what he's saying is, generally what is done is that the good wine is saved. The good wine is put out first, and then once people have drunk a little bit and a little bit tipsy, then you put out the cheap stuff, right? Because nobody cares anymore, right? The master of ceremony is just making this general statement about this, but he's saying to him, "You kept the best till last." You kept the best till last. I just think there's a parable in that, right? That God actually saves the best to last in our lives. As we grow closer to Christ, he becomes sweeter. He becomes richer, becomes more lovely. When we get to heaven, we're going to say, wow, you kept the good wine until now. You kept the best until last. The world says, hey, drink my wine of success, riches, comfort. Jesus says, I've got the best wine for you. And as you grow in me, the wine will get richer and richer. And when we get to heaven, we're going to have some good wine. Verse 11, to wrap this up. This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee. So he's saying this is his first sign. He's not saying here this is the first sign he did in Cana, although he does another sign in Cana a little bit later. He's just saying this is the first of his signs, and he did that in Cana. And it manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. It manifested his glory. So here again, chapter 1 was all about the testimony. Chapter 2, the first sign, is about creation. Creation joins the testimony of man in helping us understand that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. We've manifested his glory, which takes us right back to chapter 1, verse 14, right? The Word became flesh, dwelt among us. We beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father. So here we see that glory being manifested in him being shown as the creator. He creates wine. He creates it, right? It's not a magical formula. He created it. And his disciples believed in him. His disciples believed. What was John's purpose? That they might believe. That they might believe he is the Son of God. Now, we have seen in chapter 1, they already believe. They believe, he's the King of Kings. He's the Son of God. He's the Son of Man, right? So they believe. Now they even more believe, right? I said last time, seeing is believing and believing is seeing. And the answer to that question is yes. They believe and therefore they see and therefore they believe. And this is a spiral that goes on and on and on. They see more, they believe more. They believe more, they see more. All of that is true. All right, I want to end. Go ahead.
You said earlier where chapter 1 was about a number of different testimonies. Now we're getting to the miracles. I couldn't help but sit here and think, and I think this applies to everybody. Our testimony includes miracles that Jesus has done for us. I couldn't help but think of a miracle. How I did that. And everybody's got something.
Yeah. It's good, Curtis. I want to end with this. I want to go back and look at Mary's words in this passage. The first thing that Mary says is, they have no wine. They have no wine. And if taken in the bigger picture, the world has run out of wine. The world promises wine, promises joy, promises festivity and parties. And Mary says, there's no more wine. They run out, and Jesus has to step in to bring joy, to bring life. There's no longer a connection that, he's not swayed by family ties in that, right? As we've talked about. He's no longer seeing the connection with religious ritual, right? That's not there. He's meeting our needs, and it never runs out. And then the second thing that Mary says is, whatever he tells you to do, do it. It's a pretty good word for us. Don't think that it doesn't matter. Don't think that it's silly. Don't think that it will be embarrassing. Don't think that it's not connected to what's going on in your life. Don't think that it will make a difference. Don't think that it will not make a difference. Don't think. Do it. Whatever he tells you to do, do it. Mary has some good words for us. Just an interesting group of people, right? Mary, the servants, master of ceremonies, all of them have an interesting play in this miracle that Jesus performs. But we also need to step back and recognize he is setting forth some important principles about who he is and what this rest of this journey is going to be about, even in this first miracle. All right, any other thoughts or questions? All right, good stuff. Good one. I did 11. We're going to do 12 next time. We'll do 12 as a part of the next piece. All right, let's move into prayer requests. Turn off the recording. So as far as my stuff goes, I did go to